Welcome, everyone, and you are listening to The Last Dinosaur, and I'm your host, Chris Aversano. On today's podcast, we have our annual year in review and our very special guest, once again, Evangelos Efstathiou of SkySail Advisor, as well as CEO of Burmester and Vogel. If you're a regular guest to the podcast, you know that Evan and I, for the last 2 years, do this as the final episode of the podcast. We make predictions that may come true. We recap the year that was, and we make predictions for next year. Evan, welcome to the podcast.
Chris, thanks for having me back today.
Thank you for coming on. Third year in a row, 3rd year's a charm. You get the lucky hat. You're the first person to hit the number 3 for guests. So, before we get into the topic, you're a man of many hats. Speaking of hats, how are things at SkySail? You had a very interesting year where you've kind of grown a little bit, as well as with Burmester and Vogel.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Well, first of all, I'm happy to be back, and it's great to see the podcasts you've been putting out. Been doing a great job of creating awareness for the industry and really kind of sharing some of the excitement for both maritime and maritime tech. So appreciate everything you're doing for the industry. It's really been a great year. It's been very busy. I often don't like to use the B word because I embrace everything that comes at me. But I will say that there's a really good energy around technology. People in the industry are embracing the concept of digitalization. I think we're seeing a lot with, especially on the regulatory side, with decarbonization, Fuel EU, and other initiatives, that companies are understanding that you need to use technology to really be able to track, monitor, optimize, and reduce emissions, costs, and so on. So I think that there's a real embracing that's happening in the industry of technology. So that to me has been very exciting. What does that translate into in terms of what I've been up to and how business is going? It's, well, first off, lots of events, so lots of conferences, lots of interacting with people. I've been speaking at a number of events. I've been surprised at how the conversation now has very much shifted to talking about how AI can help accelerate digitalization. I think that that's a theme that really evolved and matured this year and is going to be the main theme going forward. AI in everything. That's one piece. The other bit, we continue to do some of the advisory work that we do at SkySail with helping companies making investments in the space. Probably the most exciting thing is we announced a partnership with AMA Capital, which is a leading maritime boutique investment bank that I've known since literally my first days in shipping back in 2000, 2001. And we have a partnership where they provide the investment banking services to help companies looking to sell their business. So on the maritime tech side, sell side investment banking that they provide, and also working with private equity groups to assist them with investments and acquisitions. And so SkySail's providing some of that maritime tech know-how and commercial due diligence to support those deals, and really created kind of a new product within the proven track record AMA has, where they've done more than $50 billion worth of transactions in maritime. So really guys that understand shipping, bringing together our experience in the tech. So that's been an exciting thing there. We have advised a couple of private equity groups on investments this year. That was pretty cool because one of the recent projects, the client that we worked with was fairly new to maritime tech, well established investing in tech. And I think, I felt good that what came out of it was, they came in and they said, wow, it's like you really understood the company we're investing in. We feel good about it. The management team also liked your work. And so it's always nice to hear that the work we're putting in is creating value and also helping bring capital into the industry. So that's been on the SkySail side. At B&V, I think that really the exciting thing has been that we started building AI solutions 3 years ago. It was a pivot that I realized was necessary during COVID when we started to see a number of competitors kind of jump into the demurrage space. So demurrage as a workflow and a software has really started to become commoditized on the one hand. And then on the other hand, customers are clamoring for better solutions. And what do I mean by that is that demurrage is a very time-intensive task. It takes up human capital. It ties up a lot of money, especially in a situation where freight rates really were volatile and increased over COVID. Suddenly, demurrage exposures are massive. I mean, looking on the oil side, a tremendous freight rates, which means like significant demurrages. Different trading patterns and dislocations means there are delays and new trade flows. So we did a pivot 3 years ago, spent 3 years working on the AI together with the B&V cloud launch, which was really just the next evolution or next chapter of the company from when I took over in 2019. And this year, it's been a tremendous success. What we found was that we've been working on the right things at the right time, and we've built AI solutions that we jokingly internally call it real AI, like solutions that work. Customers understand what our software does. We take documents, we digitize them, and we automate lay time. We're seeing it work with respect to revenues. So revenue growth from AI tools have been significant. I mean, AI now is 25% of our revenue, up from 0% last year. I think it's going to be the lion's share of our revenue within the next year or so. And the other exciting thing was that together with our head of AI, Wilson Zhu, we filed a patent last Friday. Apparently, you can now refer to us as inventors, Chris, because we have now officially filed a non-provisional patent for the analysis of lay time and shipping operations. So it's kind of neat to take all this time that I've spent in the industry and on a very specific workflow and sort of turn that into real IP and see if we can leave our mark in this one area as we change how it works. And honestly, if I could share the enthusiasm customers have when they use our solutions, it's like they're so excited, and we're seeing it because they're working with us and collaborating with us in ways that I just haven't seen, honestly, since my days at Vesson, more than 10 years ago, where customers were excited that we had technology that they really needed. I feel the same way today. So really great overall, I have to say.
Throw you back a little bit to last year. We kind of had two big buckets. One was about AI, and I think that, from what you said, and then really around AI continue to be a potential, transformational potential. And I think, amongst what you're saying and a lot of other sort of companies really have continued to build that. So I think that was maybe a safe prediction for us. Obviously, you're living proof, but I'm sure we could, if we think about it, could think about a lot of other examples of AI being part of the industry in 2024, especially on the digital side. Well, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, I think in terms of predictions, absolutely. Saying that AI would be transformational a year ago, it's a very safe prediction, low risk. The reality has been that the enthusiasm is there. Customers are still looking to see that not quite the silver bullet, but they want that real good product market fit. And I think that part, all of us are still working on, all of us vendors. Yeah. Because what's happening is, you have a lot of, and you'll see this in even everyday apps that you use. I mean, here we are, we're using Zoom Workplace, and at the bottom on the screen, I see it's got AI Companion, right? Is one of the buttons we've got here. So one challenge I think everyone is facing is a bit of AI noise, in that every technology provider is squeezing AI in somewhere, whether you asked for it or not.
Right.
And I think that's creating a little bit of noise in the market in terms of, I was like, all right, well, do I really need AI to rewrite my LinkedIn posts? Like, people read my LinkedIn posts because they're original content.
It feels to me a little bit like blockchain 5 or 6 years ago. Like everybody was going to shove blockchain into an application, and obviously there was a lot of chatter around blockchain and maritime. It was going to change things, it would change trade, and we've seen it find its good home. I think, bill of lading, there's a couple of products with blockchain in that, which makes a lot of sense because of what bills of lading do. But I felt that there was this whole thing, blockchain's going to solve everything. You're like, well, and everybody got fatigued and like you said, got distracted by the noise. And it wasn't until one or two products really where it made a lot of sense and the light bulb went on for people who used it. I think that's where we have. I think AI is going to be a little more ubiquitous and have a lot more uses, because I think we're going to see more of it in our day-to-day life beyond working in maritime, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And so first, to your point on blockchain, absolutely. 5-6 years ago, there were many use cases that were proposed for blockchain. I remember one time I was speaking at a conference. It was like an inland barge, like U.S. waterways conference, where I was being asked with two technologists, like, "Hey, why can we use blockchain to do this?" And my reply was, "Guys, like, you're telling us that you're FedExing bills of lading, as the barges are going down the river. It's like, how about you use a computer first?" And, right? And then we can talk about blockchain, right? Don't jump too far ahead. Right?
I interviewed Anton Posner of Mercury Group, and he talked about on the rivers, one step even further removed. There was an incident with a barge. It was either the dock or the barge person went down, took a photograph, went to the photo mart, got the photo developed. I don't even know if they have what part of the world they have this. Put it in an envelope when the photo was developed and sent the picture to the claimant or defendant or whatever it was. I mean, I did that interview a year and a half or 2 years ago with Anton. So that wasn't too long ago. Like you said, we're going to go from taking pictures to blockchain, and I think let's use a digital camera. Let's start with that first. So I think we see a lot, and the other big thing that we saw a lot of that we made a prediction, and obviously was private equity. You talk about your experience with private equity, roll ups into platforms and continue purchasing of platforms, buying other things. I think the most recent thing, obviously, one of the most recent things was the Kepler platform buying Spire, which is going to be have a lot of interesting ramifications for a lot of interesting folks. Don't want to get too deep into that here, but certainly they are one example of a kind of the platform idea and PE money, continuing to expand that way. And that was one of our predictions last year. So certainly that continues to come true.
Absolutely. And I think Spire, we've seen impressively, with Kepler's acquisition of Spire Maritime. Previously, they'd acquired marine traffic. So here you see a scenario where someone with an immense amount of data, very impressive cargo intelligence, buying two very strategic data sources, right, to be able to then build and enhance what they've got, and probably also to better control their own cost or any kind of risk of data acquisition on their end. And then the other bit is interestingly enough, that suddenly any other vendors that were relying on either of those two solutions now become customers of theirs, right? So there's this other.
So now looking, we did have these two predictions that we made that were two stories, but what else would you say in 2024 was something from the digital point of view that really stuck out? I mean, one thing to me, I think, obviously the continued push towards decarbonization. And I think you hit the nail on the head where I think that link between decarbonization and digitalization is not going anywhere for sure.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I think that we'll continue to see investment in that space. I mean, we've seen, on the capital side, we'd seen Zero North had raised a significant amount of capital in that space. And I think that really what's happening is that many people are tackling the problem with a number of different tools, a number of different ways. And, the question is going to be, do we see that sort of approach some kind of consensus or sort of standardized approach to it? And if so, which are the vendors that are going to win out on that front?
Or I think if my first prediction is going to be consolidation on the emission side, on the efficiency side, I think we're long overdue. And I think that you could take a platform, one of the big ones you mentioned, Zero North, or somebody else, and starting to get together with a lot of the smaller platforms that are more specific for a certain part of the emissions or efficiency chain, including, I think the interesting play would be including things like hull coatings, including other parts, the non-digital parts, the hardware part of the ship, and offering a service that is stem to stern, you go into the dry dock or not, we can help you get towards your efficiency goals. And I think that's, in my opinion, where the M&A is going to be this year. That's my bold prediction.
And in that area, Chris, we're already seeing huge interest and also POCs that are validating the ability of using robotics to do things like hull cleaning, right? So doing it smarter. So that hardware software convergence, I mean, we're a very hardware intensive industry if you think about it, right? These are heavy assets, very capital intensive. So there's a nice interplay there because, I mean, you've got engineers on board vessels already. So
right.
You can deal with having specialized robots on board and or when a vessel's in dry dock or even in port. And already we're seeing things like doing the propeller fouling checks and cleaning, the hull cleaning, doing that with robotics. I think that's an area that we'd seen investment a few years ago in that's been only increasing. And so if you can combine that with the better understanding of how well the vessel is performing. I mean, we had one project we had discussed with one of the large US tanker pools was they said, hey, we've got all this vessel performance data coming out of our systems, and they have systems like StormGeo and Q88 and Vesson and so on. So they said, well, we know when we do the hull cleanings, we know the speed and consumption every day from the vessels. Could we start to both have a predictive model? Like we have an idea of when we should do the hull cleanings, but like, can we build predictive models or use AI to help just give us a little ping? It's like, hey, here's a fleet of 60 to 100 ships. Like, when's the best time to do the next hull cleaning based on the forward itinerary, the agreements we have with our vendors in those ports, and the availability of humans or robots to help us do it. So
so
if you can pull all that information together, suddenly, you're talking about the ability to save, not just tens, but maybe hundreds or even thousands of tons a year of fuel, of emissions, and it adds up very fast.
Yeah, and I think, the other part, going off on a tangent, but I think it's relative to this discussion is, all the different wind sail manufacturers. We're seeing a lot of different wind sail manufacturers, right? And I'm not going to, I did have somebody on from Bound from Blue, and it was great. And I'm sure there are other ones that are just as similar. But you're going to probably see, whether it's consolidation that way or, again, a company saying, I'm going to buy one or two of the rotosail companies. I'm going to buy a hull cleaning company. I'm going to buy a weather routing company. I'm going to buy a paint company. And now all of a sudden I can go into any ship owner, offer all those services, one or a la carte, and digital solutions. And then because I own all that, I can consolidate all that data for you, and we can help make those forward decisions even better. And I think that to me is kind of where the next real step. Everybody focuses on the platform from the commercial side, but I think there's this whole background of information, especially when it comes to things like machinery. That's the other thing. All the different machineries, they don't necessarily talk to each other because all the companies feel like it's proprietary information. So how to get that information to work better for you as well. That's another huge part. Again, it's not commercial per se, but it's all there that can lead to better commercial decisions. So I feel that's something that for next year needs to definitely do that. One of the things that we talked a lot about this time last year, and I'm going to put maybe your Burmester Vogel hat on, but maybe more your SkySail advisory hat. Interest rates. Now, setting aside the election, let's just say interest rates stay relatively flat, or bounce around, interest rates come off a little bit. The U.S. has done better than other countries, so still makes it an attractive investment versus other countries. How has that kind of played out this year? Because that was a big story last year, and certainly the end of 2022. The sands shifted very rapidly, continued to go against kind of, the inflation happened. Now it's starting to, peter off. And I'm not going to get into the macroeconomics of, this is still more expensive than that is. But on a whole, where we've kind of maybe, hit the crest and going down. Have you seen that on the, on the side of investment, on the PE, VC funding type side?
Well, on a macro level, it's very clear that overall VC investment has slowed down. And shipping specifically, we have seen a few situations where there were founders that had raised money over the last few years, looking to continue raising to keep going, and simply hit a wall. Couldn't raise more money, wound down the business, or in some cases, sold a greater share of their business to existing investors to get more cash in and keep things going. So I think that the interest rates have had a real effect. Like suddenly, the pivot that you're seeing in the boardrooms for, say, startups, early stage companies is a question of, hey, all right, we really need you to have self-sustaining economics. How quickly can you get there, right? And so I think that is a reality check that in the era of easier money, didn't necessarily need to be there, right? Like 2020, 2021, 2022, it's like you could raise money, good amount of money very quickly and easily, and then have runway for that. Now you've got to really show something a little more substantive. I think that also, we always characterize shipping or maritime tech as a space where cost of customer acquisition is very high, right? It takes a long time to get a customer. Sometimes you have to fly out, see them often. They're not all clustered in a single place, such as, if you're in the fintech space, you probably want to be in London, New York, Hong Kong, Singapore, and you've got good markets there, right? That you can sustain yourself without even having to travel. Whereas in shipping, it's not quite the same thing. And so I think that now you're seeing software companies in the space being hard pressed. Now, all of that being said, Chris, if you see some of the funding that AI first startups are getting, it's generally in software, it's pretty astounding. So I think that if someone could really show that they've got powerful AI solutions and there's uptake, then I think they would have no trouble raising money. But the uptake part's hard because it's the needs of the customers in our space are demanding it, and for good reason.
Yeah, it comes down to product market fit, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Yeah.
With our space, and then the R word comes into play, and that's relationship, right? Because there are a lot of products that people that I faced in the past, like I just like the guy and I don't want to switch, and cost of switching, cost of relationship. So as we kind of covered, anything else you want to cover that really stuck out to you in 2024? Anything that was kind of like a wow moment, or like, oh, that's kind of interesting?
Again, we talked a little bit about Kepler's investment in Spire. I mean, I thought that was a really impressive move. To your point about buying, the paint guy and the weather routing, one of the transactions that I thought was pretty exciting was seeing Acceleron, which was this carve out from, it's like the carve out of the turbocharger business from ABB, so capital intensive, heavy industry. They actually bought a weather routing and optimization service, True North Marine, based out of Montreal, right? So there's an example of seeing somebody who's on the hardware side saying, hey, we should have these digital solutions. So that validates a bit, one of the points that you brought up about how, a lot of these markets, everyone's always asking like, well, all right, well, what's the TAM for maritime tech? And what's the TAM for each of these individual solutions and different boxes on, say, the SkySail maritime tech landscape, which we publish regularly and update all the time. Well, suddenly everything is sort of bleeding over into everything else.
That's a tough call. That's definitely a tough call to figure out what that TAM is, for sure. That is absolutely a tough call. The only other thing that really kind of stuck out, I thought was interesting, I think it was this year, that I think it was a benefit for both parties. It was Orbit MI and BV. And I think that was this year. I don't think it was 2023. And I just thought it was a nice fit. It helped BV kind of, obviously all the other class societies kind of had their main kind of platform, and does it evolve into that, or at least it gives that there is that opportunity to do that, and I think it gives them a tech on the leg up. And then from the Orbit MI, you have access to client base that maybe you perhaps didn't have, and I think that's a really interesting thing. Certainly, we've seen other classification societies do investments around that. One of the classification societies, LR, has their own kind of startup kind of incubator, safety tech accelerator. That's LR's. That's kind of interesting. Whether that feeds right into them or just more for the industry is also kind of cool. All right, so now put your money where your mouth is. I don't know if we have anything interesting that you think is going to happen in 2025.
Yeah, well, I mean, just touching real quick on the class societies, I think don't forget LR acquiring One Ocean and then acquiring Ocean Technology Group, right?
Yeah.
These are really, really big transactions. Yeah. So size of transactions in our market continues to grow. I think that's also why it's attracted the interest of capital, outside of maritime. And I think that, to your point, it's like those companies that have existing customer relationships and can efficiently bring technology to those customers, those are the players that are going to win, right? So then the question becomes like, am I better off being a specialist niche solution that can easily plug into other platforms or plug into, call it the App Store equivalent in maritime, versus trying to go it my own and building those end customer relationships? I think that's a question that a lot of the smaller companies are going to need to ask themselves going forward. Because the other bit is the investment needed to develop and deliver and sustain AI solutions. It's significant, right?
Yeah.
The biggest cost being the talent. So you've got significant costs of talent, the cost of developing the solutions, and then no matter what type of AI you're developing, you need data. So you have a data acquisition cost, right? So I think that as we kind of think ahead to 2025, the again, safe prediction is to say that those companies that have, the relationships, the Rolodex, funny enough, I say Rolodex. I was in an estate sale with my wife 2 months ago, and I got like one of the early original Rolodexes, and it happened to be a VC from Wellesley, Massachusetts. And to see these relationships from like the 80s, it's like the founder of Atari's phone number, right? I'm like, what? So I'm thinking like these human capital networks were in this spinning box, right? Whereas today, they're all in a CRM like Salesforce or HubSpot. But fast forward, like those relationships are going to be key to seeing who's really going to grow. I'll tell you, one of the predictions I have for next year is that there is going to be a bit of a retrenchment in that I think that vendors are going to have to spend time with customers to really help them unlock the value of their solutions. I have customers, and this is, again, I guess me wearing more of my SkySail hat right now. I have customers that we're spending time with right now who've said, Evan, look, we bought this system for VMS, this system for email, shared inbox, this one for tracking where the ships are. And they're not quite talking to each other the way we want. And we haven't quite improved the quality of execution, right? And we still have the same number of people, maybe even a few more now to help me manage these systems. And so they're saying, like, we really need a better, deeper understanding of how do we plug all this together so that we can make the most of all the firepower we've got? Because, there's no question that about the individual systems they've got. It's not like I want to change my VMS or I want to change my shared inbox, right? It's more of how do I get more out of it and how do I use AI for that? Right. So I think that there's this a level of AI education that's needed both within each individual solution and across the industry. That's going to be one of the things for sure.
Yeah, I could see that, and I think this goes back to relationships, and I think that this always goes back to me thinking about you have people who come from outside the industry, which I think is great, but they're over reliance on, well, we could do this, we did this someplace else, and now I think we've kind of healed that wound a little bit. But you look at Nautilus, last year, I think if you look at frankly, and maybe people will be upset at me if I say this, but you look at the number of shipping people they had in that organization, it was a very low number.
Yep.
And I think potentially their fate could have been steered a little bit differently if they had people who had the relationships to help earlier in the process. And I truly believe that from an altruistic point of view, not to point fingers, not to say, anything is bad, whatever. But I really think that you don't need to have all maritime people, because that's not good. You don't need to have no maritime people, because you're in our business. You need to have. So if you need to find that comfortable balance point, and I do agree with that. I already gave you my prediction. My prediction clearly is that we're going to see consolidation of hard and software around the efficiency. I'm going to stick by that. But that's where I have that. Evan, thank you for coming on the podcast. Go ahead. Your last
absolutely. And one more. I mean, I think, if I were to make one prediction, will be, I think we're going to see, unmet, or how shall I put this? I think we're going to see AI rollouts that don't deliver what people expect. So that's something that people need to be ready for, because the bandwidth of customers is limited, and if they do a rollout that doesn't work, it's going to make it that much harder to come back to it. Yeah. So I do think that doing things incrementally is going to be very useful in that sense. And then, to your point, I totally take your point on all this. I mean, and I recall, the Q88 team had a good depth of real shipping people. And I think that really differentiated when it came to Q88 being able to build the solution. You had guys like Richard, who's now retired, right? Like this amazing design guy, taking basically the concepts that went into making an iPhone. That was what Richard was to VMS, right?
Yeah. And because he got his start. Yeah, he got to start with he was at an oil company and then Heidelberg for a long time, and sat alongside of people that would operate this type of systems. And I think that you need to have that input along the way to know really the deep pain points. I think that's where it comes down to at the end of the day, for sure. Yeah. For sure. Well, it's going to be a great year. I wish you best of luck and happy holidays. And thank you again for coming on the podcast. I do appreciate it. And I hope everybody enjoyed this episode, and stay tuned for more in 2025. Thanks again for coming on, Evan. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here. And Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, everybody.